Okay, I guess it is the 3rd of September in 2011, and we have the pleasure of interviewing Bill Schindler. To begin with, Bill, where were you born?
I'm born in Blackfoot, Idaho,
About what year?
1927,
27.
on the 30th of May.
And your parents were?
My dad was Fred Schindler. My mother was Lena Jacobson Schindler. And Dad was a traveling salesman. And he was into this country every 3 weeks, as long as he could get in here.
Uh-huh. Now, I think I remember reading something about he may have been a candy salesman at one point in time.
Yes, he was a salesman for Sweets Candy Company, and he covered, like I say, these 3 areas: Blackfoot, Ketchum, and Stanley, with the surrounding areas. His territory was 3 weeks long.
Three weeks of traveling then.
So every 3rd week he got into Stanley.
So your father, Fred Schindler, other than being a traveling salesman, it's rather apparent that he must have had quite an interest in mining or geology.
He was raised in Salt Lake City. His yearbook stated that no one was like Fred Schindler because he would answer every question right down the line. He would not be stumped, and he never had anything short of an A in school. He only took 2 years of high school, which was possible in those days, and his mother died when he was a little guy, and so he took it upon himself to go to work and take care of his young brothers. So he would work those work for that two-year program, and then instead of going to school himself, which he would have loved to do, he opted to take care of his family. He worked for a mining company for a period of time in the Salt Lake area. And I guess that's what got him started in that thing. And then having to take care of his brothers, he looked for every kind of a good job that he could get, and candy salesman was the job. So he started in that, and he traveled for 3 weeks of them every 3rd period. He'd be up here, and he fell in love with his country, and then he became acquainted with Bill Soule. Bill had moved to this country from the Midwest, and he had acquired the Valley Creek Mine. And so Dad agreed with him to help him further advance the mining and get to where they could make something out of it. And after a period of time, they concluded that they needed to advertise for lease. Actually, the mine had been started, and I think it must have been during the Great Depression that it was closed.
Right.
And so they closed the mine, and Bill Soule acquired it. And Dad went in as a full partner. And he would, he would go looking for various places of ore and things of that nature. And he would spend time with us every time he had a chance. In fact, he could spend more time with us at Valley Creek than he could in Blackfoot.
Okay, so then if he basically really, thanks to Bill Soule and their working together, about what time did that mean the family tended to come up here? Were you up here just once in a while? Did you come up and stay up here? Were you here just in the summers? That sort of thing.
Basically, it was the summers, because we had a home in Blackfoot. I went to school there, and the minute September came, I was in school until the 30th of May. And so we would go to school, and then as soon as school was over, why, he would bring his family up here, except during canning season. Mother canned a lot of fruit. We had bottle after haul full of fruit. And so we survived on that, because she was very frugal and very hard worker. But when we got up here and spent time, he would hire a couple of men, one or two men, to work the mine and get it prepared for leasing.
Do you remember what year or what age you first came up here to Stanley?
The first time we came to Stanley was probably 30 or 40 days after I was born. I was 5 years old when we started coming up here regularly. I think I was 5 years old when we went into that partnership.
Uh-huh.
But the times that we came up before that 5 years, we were just traveling with Dad's territory. And so I had acquaintanceship with the country for a long time.
For a very long time. You were traveling up in an old car, and it was a pretty long trip for a youngster, I'll bet.
I think that if we didn't have any problems, we could get here in 7 hours.
7 hours from Blackfoot.
That's what I remember. I might be shortchanging myself.
And that was over Galena Summit?
No.
Or Chalice?
Well, if we were coming over from Haley, it was over Galena. But if we were coming from Blackfoot, we'd be coming up through Arco and Bay and such as that.
Remember what the roads were like?
They were deplorable. We lost paved road before we got to Mackey. We found ways when we were coming up from Blackfoot to go on some of the off-country roads. And I can remember at least one time that we met a car on this very narrow road. My dad had to back up. It seemed to me like an awful long time. But there was road work, and then ultimately when they started the building of the bigger roads, why they'd stop us in the middle of a highway while they were blasting the new road, and they were not kind at all, because if we were close to the blasting, they'd park us right in the middle of the highway with the sun bearing down on us, no shade, and beastly hot. So, anyway.
So it was a pretty big journey each time, and then when they started that highway construction, I believe that was in the middle 30s when they were doing that highway construction.
Yeah. And that continued probably for quite a while. But we didn't get any paved highway until way later on.
So how many were in your family at the time when you first were coming up?
Well, first coming up, there was only 3 of us, my dad and mom and me, because I was the oldest.
Right.
Then I had a brother that came 3 years after me, and by the time we came up here as partners, I was 5 years old. So that would have been 5 years from the 1927.
As kids, for instance, when you and your brother were here in the summertime, you were out at the mine and your father was probably working real hard. What do you remember doing as kids? Were you working, or were you playing, or were you having fun?
Well, we were mostly playing, especially when we were very young. The cabin area was quite a dangerous area. One of the cabins was the old cook cabin. The logs had all tumbled down. There was an open pit well, and we were absolutely, it was absolute demand that we stay away from that. We also were demanded to stay away from the fish pond. Bill Soule had a pond full of about 60 or 80 trout in that pond. It was about 6 foot deep, and that was quite an attraction for a bunch of kids. Anyway, we were told absolutely do not go to that pond without an adult. And we would try to catch grasshoppers and black flies and so forth. And every time Bill Soule came to town, if the store had any hamburger, he'd buy a gob of hamburger to feed to those trout. And you can imagine what those trout did. They just boiled that water trying to get to that hamburger or that horsefly or wherever it was.
Did anyone ever get to fish on those trout?
No, we would be very unpopular. The only thing I ever did that came close to it is that I tied a string to a ball of something, and I hung onto the string and threw it out in the pond. And one of the fish got it, and I was afraid Mr. Soule would come up when that string was hanging out that fish's mouth, but he didn't.
So, speaking of fishing, did you ever go fishing down on Valley Creek? Were you allowed to venture that far as young kids?
As we got older, or as we had company, or, adults. But when I was first up there, Bill Soule told Dad of a little stream that he could take us to fish. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about because we went up East Valley Creek, and when you got up to East Valley Creek, there was a very steep canyon, and there was a little tiny stream that trickled down that cabin, down that stream, that trail.
I think they might call that Prospect Creek. I think that's what it's been named. I know exactly where you mean.
And we called it Little Evergreen Creek.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, Dad took us up that creek with Bill Soule's mention. And I had a telescopic rod. I could take it out to your 8 foot, but usually stayed down to 5 or 6 feet. And it was so fun, and I've never seen it like that since. But on that one day that we went, Dad took Stan, my younger brother, on his shoulders, and Mom trailed along with us, and I had my fishbowl. And believe it or not, on that one day, I caught 25 fish out of that little creek.
So the family did take some outings like that, and was that all hiking or just walking, or how did you get up there?
Well, we could, at that time, drive through the meadows and get up to where the East Valley breaks up into streams, and we would stop there and we'd hike up the creek.
So that was the old sheep trail, I think they called it, for the sheep herders to get up in there. So I'm curious, did you and your brother get assigned chores? Did you start having responsibilities and chores up at the summer home at Valley Creek Mine?
You bet. One of them was a very unpopular chore. We had a refrigerator there, and in the breakfast morning, and then noon, and at night, we had to go up to that refrigerator to get our food. Do you know what that refrigerator was?
What was it?
There's no mine tunnel. And we'd walk way back in where it was cold, and by the time we got back to Mom's cooking, it was still cold, but it was still quite a tedious job to take our time away from our fun and go up there.
Sure, and to go into that mine tunnel.
Yes.
Way back in there.
Yep.
That's great. Okay. That was probably your least favorite chore, maybe?
Yeah. The next one in agony was much closer, because we always wanted clean, cold drinking water. And we would take a hike up to the #1 tunnel. It was all caved in, but there was a little stream coming out of it with ice cold water. And so every meal one of us had to go up and get a gallon of water.
All right. So you didn't have drinking water right there at the house. Your best water was up at the #1 mine.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Do you remember what Stanley was like in those early years?
Well, I'll tell you this. When my dad invited his brothers and their companions up there, my dad's brother said, "How in the world are we going to find Stanley, or find where we could get in touch with my dad. And he was totally oblivious. He thought Stanley was a metropolis. Well, then they got up there and they found 8 or 10 houses, and that was it.
Uh-huh.
And, that brings up another little story. I'll have to think of his name. Gillespie had the store and the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And true to form, every year he would have somebody catch a little cub bear or two. And this particular year, he had 2 cub bears chained to the front of his store because it attracted people to come up and give him bottles of pop or candy or, so they were spending money on him. And one day, his little boy got too close to the bear. To one of the bear.
The Gillespie's boys?
I think it was his boy.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, the bear grabbed his arms around him and he licked his face off. He had chocolate all over his face. And as soon as he got his face clean, the bear set him down and he went off playing.
That's great. Did they have names for any of those bear cubs that they kept tied up?
They probably did, but I don't remember them.
All right. Okay. So, do you remember what an estimate of the population of Stanley? You said maybe 8 or 10 houses. The population of Stanley in those younger years, it must have seemed very small to you compared to Blackfoot.
Oh yes, yes. I think that they had the old hotel, and they had 5 or 6 houses. I probably think that they only had maybe 50 or 60 people. And there were no real roads out there.
So did you go through the old ranches and farms?
Yes.
Okay, so that was
we went up past the M-Bar-M and 2 or 3 ranches and houses, and forded the creek. We had no bridges up there at that time.
Right. So you were actually going up what they call Cow Lane now, the old Valley Creek Road that went past the various farms and ranches out there. Yes.
There was no door, no screens, nothing but flies and mosquitoes. And Dad finally got some, I'll call it screen, but it was screen with plastic on it. And we screened in the door and the windows. That was our first. And then Bill Soule, when my mom took upon herself to do some cooking for the miners that we had working for us each summer, why, he moved out of his cabin, which is now the only existing log cabin. Well,
were those like, to you, were they like 2-room cabins? Were they?
1 room. We had places where we got into a corner and went to bed.
So I'll bet your mother worked really hard even in the summer out there.
She did. And she had a real solid rule that as long as we were young, we were confined to that exact area. And she made it up to us by having goodies for the chipmunks. And she would give us a bunch of cookies or something, and we'd entice those chipmunks. Well, first of all, they'd start out some distance away. And as we got through the summer, we'd have them come right up and sit on our hands and eat the goodies. And one day my little brother decided that he was going to do something different. His chipmunk came, fed out of his hand, and then went back into the tall grass. And when the chipmunk got into the tall grass, Stan thought, well, I'll scare him back out and he'll come back. And the grass was that tall. He shot his BB gun and no chipmunk. And he waited and waited, and finally he went down to see what was wrong, and he had hit that chipmunk with that BB gun, and he could have never hit it if he had been trying.
You tried.
He just felt real blue about that.
Oh, yes. So I think the mill probably had some generators for some power, but did the home, your home or Bill Soule's home, did you have any conveniences like that at all? Anything like electricity?
When I was born, we had a nice little country home. It was very small. We had telephone, we had power. In fact, my dad's business required him to have a telephone because he could call his customers and, you know.
So you had phone and some electricity in Blackfoot.
We did there.
And so then when you came up here for your mother and you and your brother, there wasn't those kind of conveniences out at Valley Creek, was there?
That is correct, absolutely. Eventually, we got a coal oil lamp, and then we got a kerosene lamp, and eventually a white gas lamp. That came a long time afterwards.
And that was progress.
Yes.
So did you did go up and go fishing, you went up the East Fork of Valley Creek and things like that. Did you ever come to the town of Stanley for any kind of entertainment? Or what about doing things like laundry and bathing? Did you ever come to the Stanley Plunge, or did you ever go to the hot springs?
We, after we had been there for a while, we did go to the, I guess the Plunge was that little swimming pool.
That little pool, yes.
Yeah. We did that. We did that for a while. Then the hippies came in.
Uh-huh.
You know what the story of the swimming pool was then.
They did away with it after that happened.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So tell me this, in all that time up there at the cabins, at the mine, did you ever have early snowstorms? Did you ever have cold? Was it always nice and sunny and beautiful, or were there any hardships in the weather, like before you went back to school? Or
we were pretty well covered by that. We got out of school on the end of May, and we started the 1st of September. And so we had school during those months.
So you didn't, in the early days, you didn't witness the weather or the severity of the weather in the Stanley country.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was colder than others, and sometimes we got snow on the 4th of July. We would go up in the wintertime during a holiday, New Year's or whatever, and dig our tunnel down to the cabin and so forth.
Well, it's no simple journey to get in there in the winter time, for sure. I'm curious, if we go back to the summers there, were there, I know that Bill Soule was there and your family was there. Were there other workers working the mine for your father, Fred? Were there,
Yes, in the summertime when they could get out. He would have one or two miners preparing the place for showing. He'd work in the glory hole and finding the bodies of ore so that he'd have a talking point when he brought people up to look at it.
in the early years, was the mill still functional, or was the mill that was already gone?
The big stamp mill
Mm-hmm.
was there for a long time. But I'll have to tell you, I don't think that mill ever crushed more than a ton of rocks. Because I think that either the Depression came on and the miners moved out, or the big money interests in the East maybe spent all their money. But the reason I say the mill didn't do much is that I know what the current mill did when the dam broke. We had tailings all the way down to where they had a secondary dam, and tailings that deep and almost up to the cabin door.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, you can go down there to where we've got our rail bridge now, or rails now, and you can go just under that rail, and there's still tailings that deep.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't think that mining company ever did mine more than just a truckload or two. That's my opinion. But I know that there were no big, massive tailing ponds.
So essentially, it wouldn't matter whether it was your father, Fred, or whether it was Frank Gunnell. There was never any real success or never any real glory hole that produced a lot, would you say?
We produced a lot.
Of gold. I guess I'm...
Well, I guess they were making money.
Mm-hmm.
They were busy mining right up until the war.
The war, yes.
And then everything shut down, except we had a couple of men hired to stay at the mine to protect things
Just kind of security.
as security.
And did the government close your operations down, or did it just close down because there wasn't any demand for gold? There was more demand for strategic metals?
There was absolutely blockades, not physical, but economic deterrence. There was no more manpower because they all went to the war effort, whether they were soldiers, whether they were involved in making guns and so forth. And there was no gasoline. I mean, everything was rationed. And for some reason my dad was able, with his traveling, that he could make his travels with what little gas they gave him. And you couldn't buy a new car, you couldn't buy gas unless you had a coupon. And so the war just cut everything off just like that.
Now, was there ever anything that devastated the mill or devastated any of the buildings or anything, like a fire or
Oh,
a bad
yeah.
winter or...
Okay. The men that we had hired, or the miner that the company had hired, went to town for a party. And they got there, and a big storm blew in, according to their words. I'm not saying that they were telling the truth, but they were supposed to be watching that property. Then they had their party and a big storm, and several days later, when they got back to the property, a fire had ensued and had burned the mill. And I don't think anybody ever questioned them. They wouldn't have done them any good if they had taken them to prison, because they were responsible. But anyway, then when the war ended, we got up there, the first ones up there after the holiday, and lo and behold, the mill pond had broken loose. And there was tailings that deep all over our whole parking area.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't even drive all the way in.
Uh-huh.
And it was nothing but a mucky mess. I don't remember if we took our shoes off and waded in with stocking feet, or if we went in with our shoes. But we went through that whole mucky mess to get up to the cabin, which fortunately hadn't been touched.
Uh-huh.
And so then Stan and I had an all-summer vacation. First of all, we had to go to the old mill and get loose boards and bring for a walkway. And you'd step on a board, and in the muck, it'd twist on you. Well, we got the first board across, and then the second. Then it started to get a little bit easier. And after a little while, we got to where we could start using some of that water that's coming down the creek from the number one, and we would make little streamlets, and we would wash that silt away and make a dry trail, or a wet trail it was. But anyway, we got on the dry ground. But it took us all summer long to get that parking area free from all that muck.
So in other words, you didn't have any heavy equipment like a Caterpillar tractor or plow or anything to move all that. No equipment like that. Yeah. Okay. And so when you were doing that, was your father then trying to still do assessment or work up at any of the open pit or any of the mine?
I'm sure that he was.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I don't remember, but I know that he was always busy.
And so that was post-war. That was after World War II?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so by that time, you must have been starting to get up there in the years, thinking about your own life and what you were going to do. What became of you and your, for instance, you and your brother? What did you start doing after World War II?
Well, actually, I almost think that some of that muck was during World War II. We actually had to make get a new driveway up the hill to get through that stuff.
So now, your father probably worked there basically clear up until he was elder, and you being the older brother, you took to the mine and the mining yourself, right?
Yes, Dad always kept an eye open on the mine. He'd always go up in the morning and talk to the miners and learn what they were doing. But in the afternoon, he always saw to it that we had some kind of recreation. And we'd go fishing or going up into other areas, up to the old dredge, Sunbeam Dam and all that kind of stuff. And he saw to it that our afternoons were free to do what we wanted to do.
So back in the old days, there was a lot of salmon fishing, and there was a lot of recreation. Kind of became a big thing post-war. Was there ever salmon in Valley Creek up there by the mine?
You bet. I had one of my teenage buddies up there with me, and he'd been there for 2 or 3 summers. We were fishing below Stanley, or below Valley Creek, and I said, "Hey, there's a salmon in there." He said, "You're putting me on." "No, there's a salmon under that bank." And so he was going to prove it to me. And he got down on his belly and reached under the bank, and that big old salmon came slithering out. And he never doubted me after that.
Over the years, like for instance in the 70s or in the 80s, was there any mining activity that was hauling, or was it just too expensive to haul?
Just too expensive to haul. And then too many...
Environmental constraints, maybe?
Yes.